Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Let's Talk About Jesus. This episode is going to be a much different episode than the previous three. In the previous three, I have talked to strictly Christians who have mostly similar views. However, in this episode, we are going to be having a much different type of conversation. I won't spoil too much because I want you guys to enjoy the episode and be just as surprised as me. In a good way, of course. Um, we will be discussing the comparison between Christianity and Wicca. So, without further ado, I would like to now introduce my guest in just a moment. Before I do that, though, I just want to thank everyone who has watched this series so far. I encourage you to keep an eye out for all the future episodes. They will be both on my Facebook page and on the Holy Ghost Adventures YouTube channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. And without further ado, let's get this conversation rolling. All right, I am here with Lyss. If you could just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and kind of explain your position on this topic.
Yes. Well, I grew up in a Christian church. Um, I've always been going to church and I have a lot of differing beliefs. But as for me, myself, I've been through college, I've been through high school, I've been through plenty of things in life, and I'm only 22 years old. So let's see if we have an interesting conversation about this.
I definitely think that this is a topic that needs to be discussed, not just on account of Christianity and Wicca, but um, I think Christianity and many religions, which of course I will do throughout various other episodes. A lot of people don't understand that Christianity has influenced literally hundreds of religions. Um, well, I take that back. Judaism has. Christianity didn't actually come into play until after Christ was born. Um, and then that's kind of how we saw the modern like Judeo-Christianity come about. So
Yeah.
your position is you kind of compare Christianity with Wicca, right? Or how would you describe that?
Yes. Well, the thing is growing up, I was always told God created everything. He made everything with its own purpose. He loves all humans, he loves all animals, but he put everything on this earth to be used for his main creation, which is us humans. And um the way Wicca is it's like this element has this energy and this element has this energy, and those spells are just using those elements energy to make, like, for love, for motivation, for cleansing. Like, I have so many Wiccan friends who, number one, will never do a spell on you unless you ask them. Number two, are always open and like, hey, I need to do this spell at my house. Do you want me to mention you in the prayer? Because a lot of them will pray right before it. And it's not praying to some weird God, it's actually them praying to God to make sure that their prayer, their spell works successfully. Um, it's just to imagine all the people who are Wiccans who go to church and pray, and you say to them, "Oh, you're going through a hard time. I'll pray for you," and they're like, "Oh, thank you." Like, they actually hold that to an esteem because they know that God exists. God created everything. Um, he gave everything its own certain energy to. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, I don't know. It's like God gave sage the ability to cleanse bad spirits. So Wiccans use sage to cleanse their house of bad energy, bad spirits, everything, to and then they later bless the house. So it's just that as an example, like Wicca is them using the energy that God put in those things for themselves or for others and stuff. And Christianity is God put everything on this earth for us, but first I'm going to pray, and then second, I'm going to try and get through to that motivation. I don't know really how to explain it, but Wicca and Christianity kind of go back ahead. Ugh, can't talk. Back back and forth, hand in hand, and some Christians just believe, oh, all Wiccans are Satanists. They all worship the devil. They don't. It's all witchcraft. And if you think about it, what was witchcraft back when the Bible was written? Like then they were actually doing like what, human sacrifices to get through everything, like real human liver for a spell and stuff like that. Like now witchcraft Wiccans, we don't make sacrifices. We just use like herbs and plants and candles and stuff like that. Like it's just, we use this to help us through it and so forth.
Mhm. So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned the sacrifice aspect because, of course, uh, a living sacrifice is very, very, very uncommon today. Thankfully, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
the human sacrifice came about more so from early Satanists. And I don't really compare Satanists with Wiccans because I do believe that though there's similarities kind of like all around, I do think that they are different enough to be considered a different category. So with Wicca, um, I know that Wiccans do believe in a god. Do they only believe in one god, or do they believe as well in another god or goddess?
Most of them believe that there is an almighty creator. As far as all my friends, they all believe that either there is God, whether it be woman or man, or non-binary or something like that. They just believe that there was a creator that created the earth and everything on it. Like they believe that, I don't know how to describe it. It's like every Wiccan I talk to about a creator, they always believe that there was some form of entity that made us, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that certainly would be correct. I believe, as a Christian, of course, that God created us in His image. I believe that God
Mm-hmm.
created everything on earth, and I actually agree, and this may come as a shock to some of the viewers, but I agree that everything has its own energy. That to me is not a religious statement to any religion, not even Christianity. It's just a basic scientific fact. If there is matter within something, then there has to be some form of energy. That doesn't mean that that energy is necessarily conscious. Of course, for example, the couch I'm sitting on, it is obviously not conscious, but everything does have some form of energy to it. I don't necessarily view that as a religious thing. I think it could be for some, of course, um, but kind of going back to that a little bit. Um, with the energy. So of course you believe that there's positive energy and negative energy, correct?
Yes.
So how do you utilize the positive energy, and how does that compare to the negative energy? Or do you believe that the negative energy can or even should be utilized?
What do you mean by utilize?
So, you kind of mentioned about like using spells and whatnot. That's more so what I mean.
Okay.
So I'm more so talking about like white magic versus black magic, which I know we may get into that a little bit later on. But that's what I mean by that.
Yeah. Mainly what I mean is white magic is basically like love spells, um, cleansing rituals, if I can remember correctly, growing life rituals, motivation rituals, and dark magic is more as if someone was going to put a hex on someone, or if someone was going to put a controlling spell and stuff like that. Like any way that they would redirect their life without them knowing is definitely a negative energy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to make the assumption that most Wiccans won't do that unless you personally know the Wiccan. But I mean, I've had a friend who I could swear up and down she was a bad Wiccan just because she was a bad friend. And then years later, I asked her if she put a spell on me, and that's why my life took the wrong turn while we were friends. And she just looks at me and goes, I would never, ever make a spell on someone without them asking me and begging me to do it because I know it can mess up their life. And at that point, I was kind of like, you know what, maybe I misjudged her. Like that's because there's so many Wiccans that have good energy, but there's also Wiccans that have bad energy. And I'm not saying like most of them are good or most of them are bad. Every person, of course, in any religion or in any lifestyle, there's always good and bad people in there. There's always a bad apple, but like at the same time, there's still like give or take, there's more good energy from my friend group with Wiccans than bad energy. And I don't know if that's just because of the majority of Wiccans or if that's just my friends that I'm around. But I can conclude that Wiccanism is more than uh, a religion. It's more as, I don't know how to explain it, and I'm kind of rambling, but
Oh, you're fine.
it's more as um a lifestyle, like you have to keep going with it.
Mm-hmm. So,
I think that's all I
not
got
a
to
lot
say
of
on that.
people, yeah, um, not a lot of people know this about me, but before I had my first experience with God, I actually, of course, people know that I was a Satanist before, but they don't know that I actually kind of went into Wicca as well. I never actually like became a Wiccan or anything. But that's part of why I was kind of curious to do this conversation, because I was eager to see if like the way that it's kind of evolved over the years compared to whenever I was in it. Um, so to kind of put that to the test a little bit, um, I know that the original point of the conversation was the similarities between Christianity and Wicca. I'd like to go over
Mhm.
those a little bit more in depth. I know one of the critical things for Christians, of course, is that Jesus was the Son of God, and therefore, of course, Jesus actually walked the earth. So do Wiccans believe, A, that Jesus actually existed, uh, and B, that he was the Son of God?
Some do and some don't. It's a strange concept, kind of. Like some believe there is a God and there was a son of a God, and some believe, sorry, the show is distracting me. Anyway, sorry, it's just some believe there is a God and some believe that there was a Jesus Christ, like there was someone that the Bible wrote about, and some believe that the Bible is just some multiple high people like talking about the burning bush, saying the burning bush was marijuana, like some some are just like, oh,
I've heard that before.
yeah.
I've heard that many times actually.
Yeah, some are just like, oh, they were tripping on acid when they wrote the Bible. Like that's just how some are. But
Hmm.
it's all kind of like relating and non-relating, and it can go back and forth kind of like I have many Wiccan friends who believe that God does exist, and I have so many Wiccan friends that believe the Bible is bullshit.
Hmm. Hey, language warning number one. I'm just kidding. So I guess at that point, my number one question would be, from your position, what is the biggest similarity, aside from some Wiccans agreeing that God exists? What would you say is the biggest similarity?
I would say the biggest similarity is the fact that everything has its own purpose. Like Christians believe that God put everything on the earth for us. Wiccans believe that we can use everything for our own advantage because of the energies. So I believe the biggest similarity would probably be that everything has its own purpose. So it it makes sense that way, doesn't it?
I think to a certain degree, yeah, because as a Christian, I think that uh, specifically all people do have a purpose under God. I know for me that I was called to preach, for example. There's some people who are called into music ministry, who are called into the gift of prophecy. That's actually another question I could ask. Do Wiccans believe in prophets? Because that I'm completely unaware of.
That is a tough one. Um I believe that some of my friends and some Wiccans believe it's like sorry, I'm with a guy. But anyway, some some Wiccans believe there is some prophets, like the prophets believed in Jesus, or the prophets were being dosed by Jesus to believe the crazy things Jesus has done. Like those stories were just them tripping over Jesus again, with like the burning bush being marijuana, you know. But for the most part, I think most Wiccans just believe that there were prophets from Jesus, people who Jesus had chosen, and that it's just, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I can't think. I can't think right now. Um, I've already taken my nighttime medication, so that's probably why I can't think.
So,
That's a hard question, though.
so kind of going along with that, I feel like that the biggest distinction that can be made there, from what I've observed and from whenever I was into Wicca, I didn't at that time I didn't believe in prophets or prophecy or anything like that. Um, I did believe in fortune telling. I believed that it was possible to be able to look at someone and be able to tell them something that was going to happen within their future, whether it was their immediate future or distant future, or something that was in relation to a relative. And I know that that's, to my understanding, probably something that more so belongs to those who practice the black magic aspect. But I feel like that's oftentimes the comparison that Wiccans and Christians get is fortune telling versus prophecy. Because, of course, prophecy to me as a Christian is whenever God speaks to you and gives you a word of knowledge about someone else. And that has happened to me where God has inspired me to go and pray for someone about a specific thing that I had no prior knowledge about. Fortune telling is oftentimes in the same vein, though whenever I believed in that and to an extent practiced it, it didn't really have a correlation with God. So that's why I asked that. I was interested to see kind of the comparison there, and see kind of your thoughts on that. Um, all that aside, though, what would you say is another similarity between Wicca and Christianity? And then I think we actually have a couple of questions from audience members, which, by the way, this isn't live or anything. Every time I film, I just post and say, ask me a question about religion. So I think we have a couple of questions. But nevertheless, back to the one for you. What would you say is another uh, similarity between the two religions?
Well, one similarity, that's another similarity I can bring up, is the fact that something else is partially in control. Like, it's not just us, you know, who make the steps and stuff, but there's something else that's partially in control of everything. Uh, whether for Wiccans, they believe it's like, oh, there's a God, or there's not a God, oh, there's this, there's that. And for Christians, it's more like, excuse me, but I mean, like, it's most like, oh, there's a God, I need to pray to God, I need to spend time in the Bible with God and stuff like that. But I'm not sure. I'm just, my mind is drawing so many blanks because my pills are trying to make me sleep.
I remember those days. I used to be on some nighttime meds, so I totally get it. And I can actually probably wrap this up a little bit sooner than normal if need be. Um, but to kind of go along with your answer and the question, so um, I believe personally, as a Christian, um, that I actually have complete control of my life. And the reason being is because God gave us free will. The Bible talks about free will, and essentially that's designed because God knew that there would be some that would reject him or not even believe in him. And he wanted to give us that option to be able to freely choose and not to be forced into anything. Um, and so the nature of free will is to essentially be able to make our own choices independently without outside interference. Now, of course, once you become a Christian, the common theory, and what I personally believe,
Oh,
and I know that some Christians don't, um, but once you become a Christian, you, of course, in essence, submit your life to God. Now, that doesn't mean submit your free will by any means, because we still can go about and do our own thing, even if it is contradictory to what we believe and if it is harmful, in which case we obviously should not do it in either of those cases. Um, but I believe that God gave us control over our own lives. And as such,
right.
it's up to us to, uh, get saved, to follow the biblical path of salvation. And even after we get saved, God still gives us the option to go and do what we want, even if it's not good. Um, and I say that specifically because I know, especially here recently with this election we've gone through, and for viewer reference, I'm never going to do a political episode because that causes far too many debates. But uh, back to what I was saying, you know, especially throughout this last election, I've seen many people, Christian and non-Christian alike, who have acted in absolutely horrible manner. Um, and I understand the passion behind everything that's been going on, but that's just further evidence of free will. As a Christian,
Right.
we're supposed to believe in peace and unity and love. That's the message that Jesus Christ taught whenever he was on earth. And so many have fallen so far away from that mark. Um, so, how that relates to your answer, um, whenever we are within God's will, of course, we follow his word and his footsteps. And as such, he absolutely does have some level of control over our lives, at least if we actually follow him. Um, I hope that is a fair rebuttal. But to kind of segue um, into how Christians utilize their free will in sometimes not so good fashion, that brings us to our second topic, which is, um, as you described it, how some Christians uh, hate Wiccans. So, if you could kind of give your take on that, and then we'll get into the questions because we do have one question.
Okay. Well, the thing is according to my parents and many other Christians I know, um, the Bible says that witchcraft is evil. That God is not accepting of Wiccans. Witchcraft is seen as evil, Satanism, a sin. Um, so that's just according to most Christians. Like, I haven't actually found witchcraft in the Bible yet. I mean, I've been studying the Bible my entire life, but I haven't got to the point where I literally look through and see witchcraft in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are quite a few Christians who just believe witchcraft is just the devil's religion, you know, and that's just not it. Like it's not true Wiccanism if it's obsessing over Satan. Like, that's just straight up Satanism. That's not Wiccan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's basically how most Christians, or at least most Christians my parents' age, which my parents are boomers. So the older generations believe that's just, oh, and it's the same way with me, with my piercings and my colored hair. Oh, you're
I've
obsessed
got
with
a skull
demons. You
tattooed on
have
me, so I get it.
right? They're like, oh, you're obsessed with demons. You're possessed. Like, no. So,
So I'm actually glad that you kind of brought this topic into discussion, because one thing that I oftentimes preach about, not literally preach because I'm not a preacher quite yet, but one of the things I do talk about is the love of Jesus and the love of God. Um, we know, of course, that God is love and He is also holy, um, but
yes.
uh, the love of God reaches very far, and one thing that I believe is that Christians are to be a representative of Christ on earth. So for me, uh, I literally do not hate anyone on earth, no matter what they do or how evil they may be or appear. I believe that the message of Christ is to love people. Um, Now, that's oftentimes where
Right.
the debate starts for the term hate the sin and love the sinner, which to an extent I agree with. But the biggest thing that I think needs to be understood with that is that every person has sinned. Every person that's ever
So
walked the
true.
face of the earth has sinned, with exception, of course, to Jesus. Um, so, kind of going with that, going to your answer at least. I want to ask you, and to my fault, I should have asked this at the start of the video, but because you brought up kind of in a way the definition of Wicca, um, I would like for you to define in your own words what Wicca is specifically.
Wicca specifically is something that I don't know how to describe it. Like it's kind of like a religion or a lifestyle to which people use um the earth's certain energies to someone's benefit. Some do it for money, some do it for friends, some do both. Others just do it for themselves. Um, and some are non-practicing. They don't do spells. So, but yeah, that's about it. Like it's in my own definition, it's basically just something that people go by. Just
Mm-hmm.
yeah. You can tell I'm like really out of my mind right now if you can't, because normally I'm actually really talkative and understanding and explain stuff, but I'm not today.
Hey, it's totally all right. I've only got a couple more questions for you, and then we can probably go ahead and just wrap it up.
Okay.
Um, so, of course, whenever you look up what Wicca is, it kind of goes along with what you said, um, kind of identical, but uh, Wicca, of course, kind of has a pagan root, and I think that that's where a lot of Christians um, kind of find their dislike of the religion. Um, and it does talk about witchcraft a lot in the Bible, and it's virtually never in a good light. Um, that's why many Christians are against witchcraft. And to be completely honest and upfront, I'm not in favor of witchcraft personally. I've unfortunately seen what it can do uh, in a negative way. There was someone that I was talking to back in school who actually placed a hex on me, specifically targeting one of my legs. And the next day, I actually got my worst leg injury that I've ever had. So I've seen kind of the negative effects of it. So
Um,
even if I didn't have the Bible uh, and how the Bible addresses it, I would still have that negative association. Just to clarify for those who are kind of curious, my personal position. Um, so it does have the pagan roots, of course, and Wicca is basically just the Western modernization of paganism. Um, whenever it was introduced in the Americas, they kind of changed it up just a little bit and kind of made it their own to differentiate between the European version. Um, so that's just kind of a little bit of
right.
history. But to go back to what you said about not being able to or at least not having yet found it within the Bible. Um, I actually, one of the things I like to do when having discussions like this is pull up specific scriptural references, specifically for the benefit of whoever has not yet seen it. Um, so, like I said, witchcraft is brought up multiple times within the Bible. Um, and I want to specify that we are not bound by Old Testament law. Um, and I just say that because a lot of these are Old Testament scriptures. We are not bound by the Old Testament law. Um, and that is because of the sacrifice and atonement of Jesus Christ whenever he suffered and died on the cross. Um, so that established the New Testament and New Covenant between us and God. Um, these are just merely historical references for Christians. And, um, the Bible, of course, does say that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So it's not that his view has changed on witchcraft necessarily, but we are not bound by the Old Testament law. So just to get all that aside, there are several here that I can kind of give you real quick, and you can go back after I post this and write these down, unless you have a pen and paper handy now. Um, but the first verse here that I can mention is Micah 5:12, and that basically just expresses that witchcraft would be pretty much eradicated amongst those of Israel. Um, and yes, I'm reading from Wikipedia here. um, there's also Exodus 22:18, which, and this is why I put the disclaimer before reading these verses. It says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Of course, I do not believe that we should go and murder anyone because that is completely absurd.
Right.
Um, that is unfortunately how they viewed things like that back then. That's why I said that the Old Testament is more so a historical reference for Christians. However, though, this verse is one of the ones that actually kind of was a precursor to the Salem witch trials, which I was strongly, whenever I studied it, I was strongly against. It's like I said, God gave us free will. So if someone chooses to go with another religion,
Go
that's
ahead.
entirely their choice.
Right.
And it's going to be between them and God at that point. Um, and God will lead them in the way, or he will at least attempt to lead them in the way that he would set forth. So that's that verse. There's also Deuteronomy 33, verse 8 through 10. There is Numbers 5:11 through 31. And that references people who practice witchcraft. And then there is 1 Samuel 28 that describes whenever King Saul, enlisted the help of a woman to summon the spirit of the deceased prophet Samuel. Um, so those are quite interesting verses um, that you would be able to go and kind of see more specifically where the Bible references either witchcraft directly or indirectly. Um, so I hope that those verses kind of help you out in terms of seeing where it's mentioned in the Bible. Because I know that whenever you know something's in the Bible and you haven't seen it or you can't find it, it can get frustrating. And I presume that that could be the case for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So um, certainly after this video or whenever you feel up for it, you can look those up. But with that being said, we have at least one question. I don't think we got any more. I have not yet seen this question, so we're kind of hearing it for the first time together. The question is, and I always keep these anonymous, how come people in the Old Testament didn't have last names? Of course, that is definitely unrelated to the episode. However, even if a question is irrelevant, I still answer it. So do you kind of have an idea of that, or do you want me just to answer it myself?
I really don't know. So, um, I'd say go ahead.
hmm Uh, I also don't really know, but my assumption is that last names were not needed back then. Especially whenever it was just Adam and Eve. I don't think that they needed to distinguish which one was which by their last name. Um, so either it was unimportant or it hadn't come into play at that time, or another possibility is that people did have last names that they gave themselves, uh, but it just simply wasn't recorded. Um,
Right.
and to those who have studied that part of the Bible, within the Old Testament, if I am wrong, please let me know because I honestly don't know. That's an excellent question. But those are my three assumptions, either irrelevant, undocumented, or just not in play yet. Uh, but with all that being said, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your night to do this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's been thoroughly interesting to kind of discuss some of the similarities, differences. Um, I can say that I'm pleased that this did not end up being a debate, and I pray that it doesn't get into a debate in the comments between my viewers because I hate nothing more than seeing people disagree in negative fashion
Right.
on my videos. But with that being said, is there anything else that you would like to discuss before we end the episode?
Um,
Anything you feel you may have left out or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it.
All right. Well, like I said, I appreciate you taking the time out of your night to film, and I hope that you have a good rest of your night. And to the viewers who will watch this episode, I hope that you guys have a good night, day, whatever it may be for you. As always, if any of you are curious about Jesus, about Christianity, shoot me a message, comment on this video. I will be more than glad to talk with you. Or if you just simply want to tell me my opinion sucks or my faith sucks, feel free to do that too, as you have oftentimes done. With that being said, regardless of what you believe, God bless you, and may you find God. And if you can't, may you find the goggles to find him. He's not far. He's never far from reach. God bless you guys and have